Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to care for a Philodendron Mamei, and I will be showing you everything that you need to do to get a gigantic plant. So firstly, just a bit of a backstory with this plant. I purchased it as a cutting in 2020 and this is what it looked like at the time. And I was very new to houseplants when I purchased this plant, and it's always really funny looking at that photo because I had it growing on a moss pole, which it did not need, and I very quickly realized that. So eventually, about 2 years later, the plant started to look like this, and I had really worked out a nice care routine, and I feel like I sort of worked out exactly what it needed to thrive and start to get those really big leaves. The newest leaf that I have on the plant currently is 55 centimeters, so that's really big. It's the biggest I've been able to grow in my care, and I have no idea how big this plant actually gets, but I think I'm on the right track to finding out. You probably will notice that in that photo I had just put up on the screen, it looks a little bit less full and very different to what it is sort of potted up in now, and that is because I took in a rescue plant, unfortunately, and it actually had spider mites, which I didn't see at the time, and it completely attacked the plant and it deteriorated really quickly. So about 6 months ago I actually cut it back completely, and it looked like this. So it was very sad, but this is how it is looking now 6 months later. So it did bounce back quite quickly, and I'm going to show you how you can get your plant to look like this. The first thing I want to talk about is lighting for this plant, because I do think that it is a quite fussy plant with its lighting requirements. It's definitely not going to die on you if you give it too much or too little sunlight. However, the leaves are quite delicate and they're also really responsive to the light that it receives. So if you were giving this plant really bright or almost direct sunlight, it may burn the leaves, of course, but you can also change the color of the leaf. So it will start to look more of a fluorescent type green rather than a deeper green. And I think if you are starting to notice that on the plant, you can probably just move it to a spot that receives a little bit less sunlight. In the past, I did have this plant growing in a spot that received a lot of sunlight. It was receiving almost sunlight the entire day, and the leaves were still really sizing up and it didn't look unhappy, but the color of the leaf was more of a fluorescent sort of sun-stressed looking color, and I just don't think the plant looks relatively healthy in that state. If you really want this plant to thrive, I think personally it would like to receive a lot of bright indirect sunlight. If you can give it almost direct sunlight in the afternoon, which is a lot kinder to plant leaves, then definitely do that, but just keep an eye on the plant. If you start to notice that sort of lighter color, move it back a little bit, but it definitely does like a lot of sunlight. The soil for this plant is really important because it does like to be watered very frequently and hold a tiny bit of water within its soil, but it does also need a fair amount of drainage because we're going to be watering it regularly. So I'll touch on its watering schedule a little bit later, but we'll go through soil first. So the soil mixture that I think works really well for this plant is an aroid mix, which has, it's very chunky, light and airy, has great drainage, but I put in the additive of peat moss, and that just helps to retain a little bit more water, but because we have it in a sort of chunky aroid mix, it's still getting that drainage that it needs in between each watering. So while we're on the topic of soil, I think it is worth mentioning the growth pattern for this plant. So like I mentioned before, that I had this plant on a moss pole, which is not the way that it likes to grow. This plant is a crawling plant, so if you can pot it up in a pot that is long and rectangular, sort of like what I have it in now, then it will definitely love you for it. You definitely can have it potted up in a sort of standard circle pot, but you'll quickly find that it will just grow out of it, especially if you're taking care of it the way I am telling you to. So this is what it used to look like when I had it in a circle pot, but I found that I had to propagate and repot quite regularly with that sort of pot size. So I've got it in a crawling pot now, and hopefully I can keep it in there for a lot longer. Watering for this plant is really important, so you need to make sure that you're having the soil mixture that I have recommended. And with watering, you'll be wanting to water probably once a week, and in the winter months maybe a week and a half, probably not much longer than that. And I like to treat this plant like a bit of a VIP. It's definitely a little bit of a princess, but I think that it really likes the type of watering that I am doing for it. So what I mean by this is this plant, it's the only plant in my entire collection that will get sort of warm to lukewarm water. I don't do anything special in terms of using sort of distilled water. It's just regular tap water, but the temperature is warm or lukewarm. And I do also add a fertilizer to this. I use the same fertilizer for all of my plants, which is Growth Technology Foliage Focus. If you haven't heard of that before, you need to start using it. It's mandatory for any indoor plant. But this plant gets my foliage focus and also some warm water. I find that using sort of a warmer temperature just holds a little bit more humidity for this plant. It is a tropical plant, so I think it definitely likes a bit of a warmer temperature with its watering. Temperature and humidity requirements for this plant I don't think matter a great deal. I do live in Australia, in New South Wales, which is a relatively sort of hot and humid climate, and I think my sort of house humidity sits at around 60%, so it's not too high or too low. I'm fine with this plant that in winter and summer it does continuously grow out new leaves. It's not going dormant or anything like that. So I think if you can give it more of a sort of humid, hot sort of environment, it will definitely thrive more so than be unhappy. But I don't think this is the type of plant that you would need in a greenhouse or an IKEA cabinet type of environment. Okay, so if you like your information sort of quick, for this plant to thrive, you will need bright, indirect sunlight, preferably really bright, almost direct sunlight of an afternoon, well-draining soil, watering frequently as well. Hot and humid if you can. Fertilize every single water, Growth Technology, Foliage Focus. Give it a long pot for it to grow across. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed looking at my beautiful, gigantic Philodendron Mamei, and I hope it also gave you the confidence to purchase this plant and start growing it. I think it's really rewarding and it's really beautiful. It does take up a lot of room, but that's okay with me. So thank you, and if you can like and subscribe, that would be amazing. I'll see you in the next video.